Recap last year, and then we'll talk about what we're going to expect this year. Let's go to the next one. So anytime we look into the future, we have to look at the past to make sure that the past isn't repeated. So in 2020, we had almost 10,000 fires in the SRA. That's the state responsibility area that CAL FIRE protects. Now, the Forest Service will protect the forest. Your local fire department protects your structures and traffic accidents and medical aids, and CAL FIRE is responsible for all the vegetation in the wildland urban interface and state responsibility areas. So basically, private property that you own, and we're responsible for protecting that. Almost 10,000 fires in 2020. 2020 was a record year, just devastating if you can remember. There were over 4 million acres burned in California. That is just a record-setting year, far and away 2 to 3 times more than we've ever experienced in the past. 10,488 structures were destroyed, and unfortunately we had 33 fatalities. So it was, because of all those reasons and many more, the worst fire season ever in California history. So let's look at this cool little chart, and because it's hard for me to make out charts when I watch them on a little TV screen, I put some numbers right there next to you. So what we're doing is we're comparing 2020 to year to date. That's what YTD, as firefighters really like to use those cool little acronyms. So we're comparing June 1st of 2020 statistics to this year to show you how bad we are, and I will tell you why we're at that point so far. So where we're at is we're at 2,878 wildfires so far, June 1st of this year. Compared to last year was 1,065. So we're well over twice the number of wildfires. And if you look at the acres burned, 1,726 acres burned in 2020 as of June 1st, and 16,800 acres burned so far in 2021. And remember the last slide, the last point there was that last year was a record-setting year. So what do you think we're in for this year? So next slide, please. Moving right along, so that's all of California. Let's take it down to our little unit here, which is the Nevada, Yuba, and Placer counties that have state responsibility area. So we have to protect 870,000-ish acres. It's not a round number, but around that area of direct protection area. The NEU is another acronym, stands for Nevada, Yuba, Placer Unit of CAL FIRE. There we had 990 wildland fires in the Nevada, Yuba, Placer Unit in 2020. Our goal in CAL FIRE, what we're tasked to do by you, the taxpayer, and what we set a goal for, is to stop 95% of all of our fires at 10 acres or less. If it's near your house, you want it at 0 acres, but that's obviously not reasonable. So we try to keep them at 10 acres or less, and that's the California statewide goal for CAL FIRE. Obviously last year we had the Willow Fire and the Jones Fire here in Nevada County, Willow Fire in Yuba County, and they were in huge resource drawdowns, and both of those obviously made it well above 10 acres. But all in all, in the Nevada, Yuba, Placer Unit, we stopped 95.8% of all of our fires and met that goal in our unit. So that's the success that we had for people like Landon, who you're going to come up here and talk, who was integral in stopping a lot of those fires, and his personnel that work under him. So there we go. Okay, so that's where we were in history. Let's see where we're at right now, and let's look into the crystal ball and see what the future holds. So the left side, I don't think I have to tell anybody that we're in a drought. We are in a very big drought. I'm sure Paul will hopefully touch on that a little bit more, but our drought conditions in California are just awful. I mean, the colors are hard to see, the slide's hard to see, but anywhere you see a red or a dark red, that means the drought is worse. So yellow's bad, red's really bad, and that dark red or maroon is an extreme drought. So we're into that area of the drought conditions. If you've looked at any of the lakes or any of the streams, this time of year we should actually be somewhere near our highest water levels in the rivers. We should be getting a bunch of snow melt. We should have really high lakes with a lot of water storage in them. And as you know, we aren't seeing that. And that'll play into the next slide that I'm going to talk about a let's talk about the right side of this one. I'm sorry, go back to that one, please, I'm sorry. It's not your fault, I messed you up there. So the right side of the screen shows the significant fire potential. So what does that mean? That means if we get a start, what's that fire going to do? It has significant potentials to go over that 10 acres, to be a fire that would really threaten your entire community. So there's a little map of California. If you see the Sacramento Valley, it's kind of out of that significant fire potential, and that's for June through August. We wouldn't normally see that all red until October or November, but the right side starts to turn into September, and you'll see the Sacramento Valley also included in that. So what does that tell us? That tells us that the lower portion of the valley is going to be very dry as well, and they're going to have extreme fire potential. If you look at the kind of the left side, the left slide there, it shows that we're already in that significant fire potential for right now, where we're at, June through August of 2021. Okay, now it's time. Thank you. Okay, so what are the forecasted conditions? What do we have to look forward to other than extreme drought and huge fires coming along? June 1st, the snowpack in the state of California measured was 0% of normal. That means we don't have very much snow. So it's less than 1%. So they just round it down to 0%. So all of the water that we would normally have up in the Sierras melting off of those mountains and filling our rivers and streams and lakes is already gone. And so it's like when you take a washcloth and you dip it in a bathtub or in a sink and you pull it up and you hold it by the center of it, the top of it's going to dry first, right? And then all the water is going to kind of flow down. Well, that's what we're seeing in our Sierras. So anything above 3,000 foot elevation right now doesn't have a lot of humidity. You can look back this winter and count how many times you took the frost off of your windshield, or you had to turn on your windshield wipers in the morning. That all contributes to very low humidities all the way through the wintertime. Think about it. I didn't think about it until somebody told me. And I remember all winter, I didn't have to go out there with an ice scraper very often for my windshield, and I didn't have to turn on my windshield wipers. So that tells me that the humidity in the air wasn't very high all winter. And then combine that with not very much rain, and here we are. No additional rains are predicted. This is California, our Mediterranean climate, so we know this time of year we don't get any. Our grass loading might be the only good news, and I don't know that it's that great a news. Our grass loading is normal. In other words, the tons per acre of grass is about where it would normally be every year. Good and bad with that. The good is it's not really super thick and it's not really super tall. If you've looked at the grass that's unkept outside of Lake Wildwood, because I know you folks maintain your stuff very well, but you look at some of the other areas, and in previous years, that grass was as tall as me, or maybe even taller, if it wasn't maintained. This year, it's about an average height of about 3 feet, somewhere in that area, but it's very, very dry. Landon and I, right before this meeting started, we were listening to our command center give out the weather, and it was at 9%, right? 9%. 9% on the east side and 6% in the foothills in our area. 6% humidity is extreme. If we get, anybody drops a spark or an ember or a match of any kind, we're going to, you lost your mic. Eye time now? No, that's the hook, folks. Okay, stop talking to him. Okay, so the grass loading is average. It's very dry, and we have very, might need to do that. The light just went out again. How about that? If you could reach. I'll just stand a little closer. How about that? Okay, we'll try that. So our grass loading, I won't go into that anymore. It's bad because that's what catches the embers and it starts the fires. And it gets them into the brush, which gets them into the trees, which gets them into your houses. So we don't want any part of that. We have some potential. If you listen to the National Weather Service, they say there's some potential for monsoonal flow. And that sounds great, right? Sounds like monsoon, sounds like we're going to get a whole bunch of water. That's not what they're predicting. What they're predicting is a monsoonal flow, which means all that moisture is up in the atmosphere and it stays in the atmosphere, and it kind of comes up over Nevada and Arizona, which are very dry climates. That monsoonal flow will stay up in the air, and all that it's going to do is give us an unstable air mass that will contribute to lightning growth and lightning over our area. So that's what that monsoonal flow equates to. It's not good news, it's bad news. So we're a little bit worried about that. As I showed you before, very high potential for large fires. And fire spread, what we're seeing right now, if you walk through the woods, you're 3 months ahead of where we would normally be. In other words, if it's June right now, we're in about September fire conditions that we would normally have in a normal year. Don't push the button. Okay. Right. Okay, so what's CAL FIRE doing to protect you? First of all, we're working with our partners. Chief Wagner right here, great cooperator. You've got some great fire protection in this area. What we're doing as CAL FIRE is we suspended burning on May 24th. That's as soon as we thought we could safely do it, meeting a compromise and asking you to reduce your fuels around your area and lower the risk of fire potential. Fire season was declared on May 24th. That's just kind of one of those check boxes that we have to hit for legalities. Peak staffing for CAL FIRE with all our 411 staffed, paid professional firefighters started on June 1st. With that, you get 27 staffed state fire engines. We have the capability for 27. We staff 22 of them every single day. We have 5 in reserve in case we need to add to that fleet with extra firefighters for high fire danger days, or if something breaks or we have to send some out to another area. We have 5 Type 1 hand crews, 4 dozers. Again, 3 of them are staffed every single day, and almost every day we have a 4th, which is our reserve dozer. But because we have a shortage of hand crews, what we've done is we've gone to staffing a 4th dozer. We have what everybody loves, and we just love to see them coming, is those 2 air tankers and our air attack right over the top of us. So that contributes. That's what we have at the ready to protect you. Moving right over. Other things that we have at the ready for you, the good news is we're getting these helicopters, which I'll get into in a minute. The bad news is our hand crew numbers are way down. So normally, I said I was in charge of Washington Ridge Camp. Normally we would have 5 Type 1 hand crews of 15 firefighters and a captain on each hand crew. Today, when we sent our crews out, we had 12 firefighters on 2 different crews and 1 captain. So a total of 13 where we normally have 16. We normally have 5 crews out of Washington Ridge. Right now we only have 2. So we are adding those additional dozers and firefighter 1 hand crews. So we've added some firefighter 1 hand crews to Amador El Dorado and to Butte. So they're kind of surrounding us, but none in the Nevada Placer unit. We also have our National Guard hand crew. The California National Guard gives us 25 crew members, officers, and enlisted folks that go out with us. They're run by one of our fire captains, and of course they're sergeants and lieutenants, but just a very good Type 1 hand crew that's stationed at our Nevada City station in Grass Valley, or in Nevada City obviously, and they go out and do fuel reduction projects during the day, and when there's an emergency they respond to that fire. CAL FIRE has got 19 of our 13 new helicopters. We've already received them, we're putting them into play. There's 3 of them that are already in service, and luckily, those are the 3 that are surrounding us. So that's a picture of one of them. At some point, they will have night capability for night drops. That's a little ways off. But what they bring to the party is 1,000 gallons of water as opposed to 330 gallons of water, which is what our old helicopters used to deliver. So these ones are basically 3 times the load that they will be dropping. They're significantly faster, they have significantly more power, and they just all around are a better, safer, more stable ship. So they're big, but they're really beautiful. We also have 23 air tankers, and oh boy, you went way faster than me, that's all right. She's quick on the gun. 23 air tankers, and we're working on our C-130 program. You may have heard of our C-130s. We got some of those from the Air Force, from the Coast Guard, and we're refitting them to be firefighting machines rather than actually just crew cargo transports and things like that. So we'll have those ready to go, but they won't be ready until next year. We want to make sure they're right before we put them into service. So now it's time to go. Okay, so some fuel reduction efforts that we've done so far in 2020 and 2021, that year of reducing fuels. We had a couple of priority projects from the governor, and the status of those, they're almost complete. So the North Fork, which is over in Placer County, we completed 900 acres. That project is almost complete. The Ponderosa West Grass Valley Defense Zone, which directly affects Lake Wildwood, it can stop a fire from coming from Grass Valley down to you, and conversely, it starts a fire that comes from you and goes up towards Grass Valley. So everybody wins depending upon the direction that fire is going. Our portion of that is complete. There's still some maintenance going on there, and they're doing some finishing touches. But the County of Nevada and our Fire Safe Council have done a terrific job there. The South Rim Fuel Break, which I'm going to have your Battalion Chief Landon Hack talk to you about that here in just a second, is ongoing, and it's doing a great job. We had 820 additional acres of private land outside of those projects that we reduced fuels in. And we have over 800 hazard piles burned in 2021 and 2020. So 800 piles of varying sizes of reduced fuels that we burn and reduce those piles. Moving right along. Okay, so that's the projects that we did. What are we hoping to do in the future? We're hoping the County of Nevada, you see all these little signs down here, Nevada County Fire Safe Council, the County of Nevada, and Yuba Watershed Institute. Am I stealing some of your thunder? You can talk about that? Okay. So those three folks have collaborated. Nevada County has really stepped up to the plate for everybody in Nevada County. Truckee area, all the way to Lake Wildwood and everywhere in between the South County. They're stepping up to the plate. They have written grants, and they are going to be the folks that sponsor these grants, and the people that implement them will be the Fire Safe Council and the Yuba Watershed Institute. And here's the grants that they've requested, and it's Landon's job and my job to shepherd those and make sure that they get through the system and get you folks here in Nevada County and Lake Wildwood all the money that we can to reduce those fuels. So first and foremost, they put in for about $2 million, it's a rough number, for green waste and removal of chipping. So chipping all that, when you need to reduce some fuels in Nevada County, you can call them up, and they have a great program for that. And then all the free green waste sites. So $2 million grant that they're requesting for that. Ponderosa West Defense Zone, which again directly affects Lake Wildwood. It's going to continue to the north from where it ended, from where our successful program ended this year. The South Rim Fuel Break, which Landon's going to talk about here in just a minute. And then the South County Fuel Break, which is kind of protects the Lake of the Pines and Alta Sierra area. Basically, it's a fire line that goes from Highway 49 near Brewer Road area, roughly, and then goes off to the east towards Dog Bar Road. So that would be able to protect, the counties, the communities of Alta Sierra or Lake of the Pines, depending upon the direction that the fire was coming from. And then they've also put in for a forest health grant, up a little bit more up in the Tahoe National Forest area. That's a $5 million grant that they've requested, and that's along the Highway 20 corridor in Nevada County. So moving right along, and I think we're up to Landon, who's going to talk to you about the South Yuba Rim Fuel Break.
Thank you. All right. Like Jim said, my name is Landon Hack. I'm Battalion 2314, and I have the Smartsville and Columbia Hill Battalion, of which the greater Lake Wildwood Pin Valley Fire District falls in. So South Yuba Rim Fuel Break is a concept that we came up with that essentially goes from down here. This might be kind of hard for you guys to see, so I'm going to do some pointing. But this is Bridgeport, and this is the Yuba River drainage here, and up in the upper end there we have Malakoff. So the red line on this kind of depicts the rim up above the river on the north side. And so this is about 21 miles. And with the projects that are slated here, it encompasses potentially about 8,000 acres of ground, of actual land that we're working towards treating. The two major focuses for CAL FIRE resources in the short term right now are going to be the Reader Ranch Vmp, which is roughly 2,000 acres, and then we're going to be working with our partners up at State Parks, up at Malakoff, and they're looking at implementing about 2,100 acres of VMP, which is broadcast burning. So when I say VMP, I'm talking about doing control burns. Some of the other projects that we're working with, like Chief Mathias said, with the Yuba Watershed Institute and Fire Safe Councils and Circle is part of that too, are some of these other polygons that are up here from Bridgeport. The Rice's Crossing area, there's about a 600-acre area there that we've identified that has got some private landholders as well as Bear Yuba Land Trust. The purple one down in here, this is state park property down at Bridgeport. So I'll be working with them, trying to get some of their fuel work done. One that Yuba River or Yuba Water Institute, they're looking at trying to take, with this grant funding, if they win the grant, one of the polygons that they're looking at doing is, this is basically the French Corral area here, and that would tie into the western side of our Reader Ranch VMP and provide more fuel work and reduction down towards French Corral, down Birchville Road, towards French Corral. On the other side of Reader Ranch, a project on the CAL FIRE side that we're going to move to after Malakoff and Reader is the Bunker Hill VMP, and that basically goes on the north side of Highway 49, or the east side of Highway 49, north of the river there. This purple line, or blue, I think it's blue for you guys, the Montezuma fuel break is about 13 miles of roadside reductions, anywhere from 75 to 100 feet both sides of the road. That was a lot of chipping and hand piling, that kind of crew work that was done for that. So what does this mean for the cloud, right? There's all this stuff up here. So anybody that's been around for a while, recall the 49er fire. So the 49er fire started right up here at Highway 49, right about at Birchville Road on a north wind day. And it burned to the southwest and into Cross Benny Springs and Lake Wildwood. So this system of fuel breaks, once completed, is going to give from Bridgeport to the south, basically, including Lake Wildwood, some defense from any type of north wind event coming out of that canyon, or north of that canyon. And vice versa for the community north end one, right, like we were talking with the other ones at Ponderosa, it also gives them some protection from something that comes out of the canyon and moves to the north. I think, next slide. All right, did you want to touch this stuff? Sure.
Okay, and turn off.
Okay, I think we got it on there. Yeah, I got the hook again for my own guy. How about that? So, when you talked about fuel breaks, I hope I didn't touch on that. I hope you heard the entities that were involved, the agencies that were involved, Circle, Bear Yuba Land Trust, State Parks. That's a beautiful canyon. We are not going to moonscape it. What we're hoping to do is do responsible fuel reductions in there. So what we ask you to do is the same thing. Have some personal responsibility on your property in and around Lake Wildwood. We don't want you to do the right thing the wrong way. And the right thing is to reduce fuels on your own property. The wrong way to do it is do it irresponsibly. responsibly. On windy, hot, dry days, low humidities like we just talked about, 6% in this area right now, go out with your lawnmower and mow. It's a little late in the year to do that, especially if you're using metal blades. That's a great picture of a lawnmower. Somebody was just trying to reduce fuels and do the responsible thing. It was either too dry, too windy, or too hot, and they went out and tried to reduce those things. So fuel reduction does increase safety for everyone, but if you do it the wrong way, it's too dangerous. Just use extreme caution with any fire until we receive some significant rains. Moving right along. Okay, our red flag warning program that we're in partnership with OES, with Penn Valley Fire, you're going to see these red flags up and around on days where the National Weather Service says it's really hot, it's really dry, and it's really windy. So we are going to be very studious about taking those signs down. And when you see those, or flags, I guess is a more proper term, when you see those red flags up, be very, very cautious. Be aware, be on your game with the Ready, Set, Go program. Pay attention, make sure you listen to everything that Paul has to tell you about how to be as prepared as possible so that you'll get the notification. And we will partner with everybody that we can, from our fire safe councils, our resource conservation districts, and our fire-wise communities, like you have an excellent one here in Lake Wildwood. So make sure everybody partners together. And that's it for me. So we'll do questions at the end, but I want to thank you for your time and thank you for helping us to do the protection of your property. It's a team effort, so thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Well, just to summarize what I heard is that this is a bad year, and it's going to get worse. It's about as bad as it's ever been. I also heard that we have a lot of fires that we as citizens don't even hear about. There was a fire today in Hummingbird. It was a vehicle fire this afternoon. It didn't get into vegetation, even though we had low humidity. We had no wind, or very little wind, so thank God it was stopped. But I was always amazed when I used to work, how many times the fire department responds to fires and puts it out. And they could have easily gotten away and caused a major incident. And 95% of it is what you said, that's how many fires stopped within 10 acres. That's pretty awesome. It's also why, when there is a fire, the fire agencies throw everything at it. You'll hear planes, you'll hear engines, you'll hear all these people go, because it's easier to cancel than it is to add them later on. I also heard what's positive for me is that I think the fire service in the state of California is being a lot more proactive than they were, say, 5 years ago. They're doing things to reduce fuel loads. And I think that's great. Okay, our next speaker is Mr. Paul Cummings. Paul Cummings works for the Nevada County Office of Emergency Services Program Manager, and he's going to talk about Ready, Set, Go. Paul.
Thank you, Gene. Like Gene said, my name is Paul Cummings. I'm the County Emergency Manager. I'm going to stay close because I don't trust this microphone. I'm not sure how long it will last.
Okay, expected batteries good. Okay, Cal Fire trickery.
You're not a firefighter, don't worry about it.
Okay, sounds good. Paul Cummings with County OES. So real quick overview of what the Office of Emergency Services does. We try to support our fire and law partners. We try to prepare the community for, the unforeseen, the things that we don't want to have happen, like was already mentioned, dam break, flood, wildfire, and a lot of the things that we're going to talk about tonight can carry over to multiple disasters. So staying informed, having your go bag ready, communicating with your neighbors, those are all things that can get you across many disasters. I did write a few notes on my Palm Pilot, so I'm going to check what I wrote on my hand here to make sure I don't forget anything. Chief Mathias wanted me to talk about the drought. I will touch on that. I think you did a great job already covering the threat that we are likely going to see, the enhanced fire threat because of the drought. We do have, the governor declared proclaimed an emergency for the drought. That was about a month and a half ago. NID proclaimed a drought emergency, and the County of Nevada proclaimed a drought emergency. So we do have a significant drought that's going to affect the tree health, the fuels. It's going to affect public safety power shutoff because PG&E's infrastructure is more likely going to be threatened by that. So that's something that's going to affect us and that we should keep in mind. I do want to thank our partners, CAL FIRE, for the presentation on the grants. There is a lot of collaborative work that the community doesn't get to see, but that we are trying to all work together through the Fire Safety Council, our Coalition of Firewise Communities, our state and federal partners to try to reduce the fuel load to make this community safer. So I'll go ahead and dive into the presentation that I've got now. This is going to be about 25 minutes of educational material. Grab your notepad, take some notes, have your computer open or your phone so that you can follow along to some of the websites that I'm going to point out tonight. So this first slide just shows, at a very basic level, some things that you can do to stay informed. You know, one of the first and best things that you can do is try to maintain your situational awareness on a red flag day or a fire weather day, really all year round, because the fire threat is here. We are in fire season. So there's a lot of graphics up here that just really point out the different places you can go to get information, and I'll talk more about these later on. But the National Weather Service, the county website, Facebook, Twitter, Nextdoor, whatever that circly thing is on the right side, Instagram, I think I'm too old to know what that is. Landline phones, cell phones, radio, those are all great ways to stay informed. Next slide, please. So we'll start off here just with a quick overview. This is a screenshot of the National Weather Service. I'm sure many of you are getting weather from a lot of different places. This is one of probably 100 places you can get information about the weather. But we do like to use this because this is vetted and approved information that oftentimes our decision makers are using to take action. So you can use the Sacramento or Reno information. I recommend Sacramento for our area. Go to weather.gov. You can type in your zip code. Great place to find information, like today we're under an excessive heat warning. You can go there to find information about fire weather watches and red flags, see the start and stop times and some of the parameters around those threats. Next slide, please. So Chief Matthias already touched on this. I do want to use my visual aid here of the Ready, Set, Go handbook. All of you should have gotten one of these in the mail, and I'll touch on this a little bit later. But a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight is in the Ready, Set, Go handbook. So on page 15 of the Ready, Set, Go handbook is the graphic that you see on your screen. There's a few parameters here that are important to remember, and I think, again, Chief Matthias touched on this, but on a red flag day, we're going to have strong winds, high temperatures, low humidity levels, and dry fuels. All of those things come together to create the conditions for a wildfire or a mega fire, a fire that gets out of control with a small ignition source. So when there's a fire weather watch or a red flag day, we really have to increase our readiness level. And that's what we want to focus on tonight with the set and go piece of Ready, Set, Go. Next slide, please. So I put this slide up here just to point out that public safety power shutoff and fire weather, they go together. They go hand in hand, right? So on the days when we need to really be most ready and we need to be most connected and we need to get key information, whether it be from the internet or from the phone, unfortunately that infrastructure is going to be weakened. It's going to be degraded, unfortunately, because of public safety power shutoff and because of PG&E. Every time we have a fire weather watch and a red flag, that doesn't mean that we'll have public safety power shutoff, but we need to consider that PG&E may de-energize its infrastructure to protect it from some of the fire threats that are out there. Next slide, please. So this slide, again, very graphic, just focusing on some of the things that we need to think about and we need to start to try to work through when we're under these fire weather conditions, when we're in that set phase. So on the left, we've got a picture of a map. Somebody's gone to Google Earth and they've plotted out a way to get from their house to the main arterials. So in Lake Wildwood here, you want to figure out what's the quickest and fastest way for me to get to Highway 20, because that's going to be your best evacuation route out of the area. So we have a little saying, scout your route to find 3 ways out. That's something that you should all try to do, find 3 ways out of your neighborhood. We know a lot of folks in maybe even Lake Wildwood, but in our community and our county don't have 3 ways out. So that's where you really have to stay engaged and leave early if you can. So print those maps off because you can't depend on your cell phone, you can't depend on the cell network. You're going to be stressed out, so having a printed map in your hand is going to be really important. Can you go back one, Virginia? Sorry. So the emergency evacuation meeting place. So, you know, we all have family members that are oftentimes dispersed across the county, and we never know when that big fire is going to kick off. So if you have, you know, where you live, and maybe you have a family member that's at home, and then you have kids that are at school in a different part of town, and then you have somebody else that works somewhere else across town, it's important that if there's a big fire and phone lines are clogged because everybody's trying to get on the phone to talk to their family, that you establish a meeting place. So for a while, my family's meeting place was Kmart. Because we live in Penn Valley, if there's a fire in Penn Valley, we're going to go up the hill to Grass Valley and go to Kmart. If we can't go up the hill, then we're going to go to Yuba City and we have a meeting place there. So that you know that you can reunite with your family even when the cell phone's network is down. So consider that. The right side graphic talks about a program that we have that's also in your Ready, Set, Go handbook. It's called Find Your Five. This is where we encourage the public, residents, and here in Lake Wildwood, this is a great place to do this. Talk to your neighbors. Start to get people into your own private network, that if there's fire weather or if there's a fire, you can connect with them. So if Virginia was in my network, I would send her a text message or a phone call if I found out that tomorrow's going to be a red flag day. I'd say, hey Virginia, just to let you know, tomorrow's a red flag day, so if there's a fire, I'm going to be home, and if I have to leave, I'm going to go to Kmart. So we're going to talk about my plan with her, and then she's going to share that with her network. And so what it does is it creates a mutual accountability amongst residents, and it also is a good way to share information. If there's a fire, Virginia may come and knock on my door. If she can safely do that during an evacuation, say, hey Paul, wake up, there's a fire, you need to get out. And I know Virginia did that during the Hilo fire, so thank you, Virginia. Again, do that when it's safe to do, if it's safe for you to do that during the evacuation. Next slide, please. So here's a couple of formal ways to be informed by the county. Code Red, I think most of us have signed up for Code Red, but if you haven't, I'll talk about that. And then Nevada County updates. So Code Red is going to be a tool that the county Office of Emergency Services or the Sheriff's Office or some of our other law partners may use to send a message out to the public about a fire in your area. So it's going to be a very direct message saying, there's a fire, you are under an evacuation warning, or you're under an evacuation order. So that's going to be very formal and direct messaging that's going to come from our fire and law folks that are going to be telling us what to put out there. We'll be sending those messages out by zone. There's a new zone-based evacuation system that I'll talk about here shortly. So those two systems go together, they're complementary. Nevada County updates, so if you go to readynevadacounty.org/alert center, this is where we're going to put general information about something that's going on. We may repeat some message that's already gone out over Code Red. So this is a secondary way to get information, and it's going to be an email push. So to sign up for Code Red, go to readynevadacounty.org/Code Red. And what we'll do is when you sign up, it's going to be based on your address and where you live, and you'll get a text message, a phone call, and an email. And so keep in mind that if you live in Lake Wildwood and you're signed up for an address in Lake Wildwood, if you're in Nevada City and we're evacuating Nevada City, you won't get the message because it's not going to follow you around based on where you are in your cell phone. It's going to go to where you've registered. Next slide, please. So small text for the people in the back of the room to read, but these are just 10 ways that you can stay informed. The next two slides are going to cover a lot of different sources of information. I know our office gets asked a lot of times, how can I stay ahead of the fire or what's going on? Sometimes these situations develop quickly, or they're in the middle of the night, and that's where you have to rely on getting that Code Red message, or somebody like Virginia knocking on your door, or you hearing the Hilo Siren. But news and social media, so go to Ubinet, Nextdoor, Facebook, the Union Online. These are all places to bookmark, to watch, because the community will be talking about things happening in our area. We already talked about the weather, and we know that weather is important because fire weather is going to drive fires. It's going to make fires worse. So it's important that we have multiple sources of weather information so that we know when that fire threat is high. There's some fire cameras that are out there that you can use. So if you go to alertwildfire.org, these are free cameras that CAL FIRE, PG&E, and other agencies use that actually are moved and panned by our Grass Valley ECC. And they'll go look at fires to determine what's happening and how much is smoke and fire behavior and things like that. So you can tune in as a resident and see what's happening in your area, so that's a great resource. The radio. So in this area, all of us should be able to receive KNCO and KVMR. This is a great secondary or tertiary form of information. If there is a fire in your area and it's starting to build and there's evacuations, our office will be communicating with these different radio stations, giving them information about the fire and what's happening. we'll be talking about which zones have been evacuated, and so that would be a great place to pick up that information. So get a hand crank radio, sit in your car, tune it from your house. 211. So 211 is another great resource if you want to find out information about the fire. Once the fire gets going and we have, again, our Emergency Operations Center open, we will embed somebody from 211 in our EOC, our Emergency Operations Center, and we'll be pushing vetted information from the county, which is going to come from our incident command folks, about the fire, the evacuations, what's happening, so you can call 211 to get an update on what's happening with the fire. CAL FIRE has a push text alert that you can sign up for, and so if there's fires in our region, you can get a text message from CAL FIRE that will tell you what's happening there. Next slide, please. We've already talked about Find Your Five. We've talked about Code Red. There's another system that we use that's controlled by the Office of Emergency Services called the Emergency Alerting System. So this is going to send messages out through the wireless emergency alerting network, which is actually will ping your cell phone with a text message. There's the EAS, which will send scrolling text across your TV screen, and then we can also create recorded messages that are going to be both in English and in Spanish that will push out, that will interrupt radio programming and periodically play the message. So the message might say, this is the Nevada County Sheriff's Office. There's a fast-moving wildfire in your area affecting zones NCO E21, NCO E22, and NCO E23. Evacuate immediately if you're in these zones. It's going to be very specific. And then last but not least, the Hilo Siren. So what we're trying to create here in the Office of Emergency Services with all of our partners is a multi-layered system, many safety nets, so that if one cell phone tower is down or if landlines are down, we have other ways to inform you, whether that be through Find Your Five, the radio, or the Hilo Siren. So what the Hilo Siren does is kind of our last line of defense. We'll have law enforcement folks in our area. They're going to saturate the area during evacuation. They'll be driving around playing that Hilo Siren really loudly. It's going to have a very distinct sound. It's going to sound like a European siren, and we'll hear it at the end of the presentation when we play a short video. That siren means one thing and one thing only: evacuate and evacuate now. They will only be transmitting or blaring that siren when you're under an evacuation order. And we'll talk about the differences between an evacuation order shortly. Next slide, please. So I did want to just talk about the Ready, Set, Go handbook one more time, because really, primarily everything you need to know is in this handbook. These handbooks have been made available to Penn Valley Fire. We're going to get a tote full of them. We got them today, so they're in place. So you can, you should have gotten one in the mail, but you can also, if you didn't get one, go over to Penn Valley Fire. The Lake Wildwood Firewise community is going to have a bunch of these. They're also going to have some of the Know Your Zone magnets. So take a look at the book. It's got a lot of great information. We sent about 57,000 of these out to the community, and it's really got everything you need to know. There is a 15-minute Ready, Set, Go video that we put together that I think the Lake Wildwood community can probably send out via email or make that link available. It's going to capture everything that I talked about tonight in a lot of what's in the Ready, Set, Go handbook. So really encourage you to watch that. It was really well done. Next slide, please. So now we're going to transition to really focusing on you and your family and personal preparedness. You know, all of our law and fire folks, they're going to do everything they can to protect this community and to get you out during a fire, but you have to really do your part, right? We have to meet them halfway. We need to have some personal accountability and personal responsibility as much as we can. So this is when we want to think about doing those things like packing your go bag and checking in with your five and fueling up your vehicle, and we'll talk about that. So next slide, please. So I've got a few icons here that just really are memory joggers for things that we need to do on these high fire threat days. So I've already mentioned that when there's a high fire threat, PG&E's infrastructure is threatened, and so they're likely to de-energize their lines. And what does that do to us? Puts us in a position of weakness, because we may not be able to make phone calls, we may not be able to get our code red, so we have to increase our readiness level. Gas up your vehicle. That's something that you might want to do once you've been notified that there's a fire weather watch or a red flag. Go fill up your vehicle all the way, so that if you are an evacuee, you can drive all the way down to Sacramento if you have to go stay in a hotel. Who knows, if there's a regional lightning event like there was last year, we could have fires in Yuba County, Nevada County, Placer County, so you don't know how far you're going to have to go to get gas, food, lodging. So think about that, fuel up your vehicle. We've got a picture of somebody pulling the little handle to open up their garage door from inside. I think Chief Wagner mentioned that there were some folks who couldn't get out of their garages when the power was out, because either the power's going to go out because of the fire, PG&E may de-energize because of the fire, or they may have already de-energized as part of a public safety power shutoff. So you really have to plan life around not having power, and you can't open your garage door if you don't have power. So find out ways that you can open your garage door and get your vehicle out so that you can evacuate if there's a fire. Red flag day, maybe park your vehicle outside or leave the garage door open. Park your vehicle back into your driveway if you can, so you can make a quicker exit. Have your go bag ready. Think about your pets. You know, a lot of us don't want to leave without our pets. They're like family members. So as you're doing those preparations, getting your go bag set up, get your cat carrier and your dog carrier and the food, the leashes, all those things you need for your animals, because we know you're not going to want to leave without them, and you want them to be comfortable while you're evacuated. Check in with your 5. We've got some things to not do, so we don't want to be dragging chains. We don't want to be, using equipment that's going to create a spark like chainsaws and lawnmowers, and we certainly don't want to be pile burning, because I think, as we already heard Chief Matthias say, it just takes one spark on a red flag day to create a catastrophe, and we don't want to be that person. Next slide. So now we're going to transition into, I'll try to go through it relatively quickly, but there's a new system that we're using now in our county called Zone Haven. And so what this is a zone-based evacuation system that's meant to make evacuation faster, easier, and safer for our residents and for our first responders. Next slide, please. We're going to play a short video that was really well done, created by all of our partners, that will give you a nice overview of how the Know Your Zone campaign and Zone Haven work.
Nevada County has a new tool to make evacuations safer and more efficient in the event of emergency. This new tool is called Zone Haven, and we need you to know your zone.
In order to know your zone, you need to go to community.zonehaven.com, type in your address. Once your address populates in the pop-up window, take that information and write down the zone that is given to you, where you know you'll find it in case of emergency.
Zone Haven and knowing your zone does not replace Nixle and or Code Red. It actually supplements them, and it makes those tools more powerful because you will know what zones are being evacuated or which ones are being placed on advisory. And as a result, you won't have to do anything else other than listen to those messages and know if it's time to go.
Even if you don't have internet, this could be done by word of mouth, it can be done by radio, or it could be us driving down the street, so please know your zone.
From Truckee to Lake of the Pines, from Chicago Park to Spencerville. Every single square mile of Nevada County has a zone. And having a zone that you know for your neighborhood is going to help you save time to be able to evacuate and keep you and your family safe.
All right, so that was a really well done video. You can see that we had everybody from Truckee to Grass Valley to the sheriff there. This is a collaborative system. Zone Haven is a county-wide zone-based evacuation system. So all of us, when we work and when we play and we live, we are all in a different evacuation zone. We're moving across them all the time. Next slide, please. So the concept, quickly at a basic level, we've chopped the county up into 250 different zones. These zones were created based on topography, roads, egress and ingress routes, population. So there was a lot of different factors. There was a scientific approach to creating these zones. They weren't just arbitrarily made. Next slide. So what are the benefits to the community and to our first responders? So there's clearer messaging. So before UBNet or 911 or our office or posts online would say, well, I know there's a fire, I know there's an evacuation warning, how do I know if I'm in that area or not? We did create the Ready Nevada County dashboard to try to solve some of those questions, but this will be even more specific now, because you should always know what zone you're in, where you live and where you work, and it'll be very clear. We're going to be, in our code red messages and online, it'll say which zones are under a warning and which ones are under an order, so that's going to be clear. There'll be no more delays in creating evacuation messages. So for the Jones Fire, Lieutenant Jacobs, who's not here tonight, he and I sent about 14 different code reds to the public, and for each of those, we had to click a dot on a map based on inputs from the Unified Command, where the fire and the law folks come together and make decisions during a fire, and we had to draw each of those zones. It took time. We had to make sure they were accurate. We had to craft the message and put it in there. Now with these zones, we can just click a button to turn the zones on. They're going to be affected by the message we're going to send that we've gotten from a law and fire. Critical infrastructure and traffic control points, information like, is there a school in this zone? How many kids are in that school? Is there a daycare? We've taken the time to work with all of our fire law and fire partners to build out that information, and so there's an internal side of this tool that we can actually now provide that with our law and fire folks during an incident, and they'll know this critical data. There could be information about gates and all kinds of other things that they'll use. And then public safety agencies, they just know what and who is in those zones, so I've already mentioned that. Next slide. I won't read the list. If you get to see the slides, you'll see that this pretty much represents every law and fire agency at a local, state, and federal level in our community, all came together to vet the zones that were in their jurisdiction. So again, you should feel comfortable as the public knowing that this is a very well thought out system, a very well thought out program that will make evacuation safer for you and your family. Next slide. So what is Zone Haven? Zone Haven is a system that we were able to obtain and create through a company called Zone Haven that's out of San Francisco. And we got this as part of a grant, so we were very thankful for that. It's a software suite, and it was actually introduced to the Office of Emergency Services by CAL FIRE, so thank you for turning us on to that. Next slide. I won't go into too many details here. I've already mentioned that there's an internal version for first responders, which is the evac section, and then aware, which you will all see if you go online and take a look. Next slide. So some of the benefits of that internal version, it can be used to prepare, and plan, and train, and will actually be used during live events. Next slide. And then this slide is really just pointing out what I want to highlight to you is the QR code here. So if you're watching this from home and you have it on your computer or on the TV, you can actually take out your phone and you can go to the picture, like you're going to take a picture, and you can point the camera at this little black square with all the little dots, and that little magic QR code will take you to our Zone Haven website. So when you do that, it'll pop up at the top of your screen. You touch the little pop-up, and you'll be at community.zonehaven.com, and you can put your address in, and then you'll see which zone you live in. So pretty cool. Next slide. So this is what the website will look like. I think we are going to have a quick demo once we get to that point. It's all grayed out, which is good in this instance, that there's no evacuation warnings or orders in that area, but that's what it'll look like when you go to the website. There'll be information about that particular zone, and then there'll be color-coded indicators based on what's happening there. Next slide. These colors reflect what you can expect when you're actually in Zone Haven, so it'll be red if there's an evacuation order, yellow if there's a warning, and you can see the rest when you go to the website. Next slide. So when will it be used? I think this is an important topic because it opens a broader conversation around when will we issue evacuation orders and warnings to the public. Our office and our partners are oftentimes asked, hey, there was a fire in our area, I saw the smoke, I read about it on Ethernet, why didn't we get an evacuation warning? Why didn't I get an evacuation order? I didn't get my code red, what happened? So what I want to implore you to consider is, and we'll talk about this a little later, that our first responders oftentimes will not always issue an evacuation warning and order depending on the circumstances. So Zone Haven goes along with Code Red, and we will not be using these tools if the fire law folks determined that an evacuation was not required. So I just want to touch on that. This is not a replacement for Code Red. I want to make clear that you don't sign up for Zone Haven. You have to just remember and know your zone. So it's something that you write down and remember. It's complemented by Code Red, which is an opt-in system. You do have to sign up for Code Red. Next slide. So I started the conversation here with the evacuation matrix. So essentially, what are fire and law folks thinking about when there's a fire happening? I'm not a law enforcement officer. Lieutenant Jacobs normally presents this slide, but I think it's important for you to know is that we have highly trained professionals with a lot of experience that are in law enforcement and that are in fire, and they're going to come together and they're going to form what they call Unified Command. And this is going to be where they look at the situation, maps, imagery, using radio communications, and they're going to build the mental picture of what's happening, and they're going to start to make decisions. And when they're factoring in whether they should evacuate the public, they're going to look at some of these triggers and these things that we have listed here. How close is the fire to people, to populations? What is the fire doing? What are the conditions? What's the fuel like? We've already heard that our fuels right now are pretty dry, so that's going to be factored in. Topography, is this thing going up a steep slope? And then the weather, are we in a red flag? Is the wind blowing? Is it not blowing? Those are all factors that they will consider as they're determining if they're going to evacuate the public. Next slide. So we're still talking about Zone Haven. I'm not sure if you can see, it's a long way out, but I've got a magnet in my hand that looks just like what you're seeing on the screen. And so this is part of our Know Your Zone campaign. So I recommend that everybody check in with the Firewise community. I think that they're going to have these available maybe at the admin office, or you can check in with Barbara Teagues, I'm getting a head nod, or go over to Penn Valley Fire, pick up one of these magnets. You can scan the QR code just like we talked about. Get a Sharpie right in the lower corner, what your zone is. Put it on your fridge, because we all go to the fridge like 10 times a day. I'm eating constantly, so I'm there like 20 times a day. And that way you know when you hear on the radio, or you get your code red, what zones are being evacuated, if they're under a warning or an order. You already have it written down, so when you're stressed out, you can just look right at it and you'll know. Next slide. I think we've already been through this exercise where we're showing you how to actually go to the website. Next slide. So this is a really new tool. So I think I'm proud to say that Nevada County was able to come together with its partners and roll this out before the real heavy start of fire season. You can see some of the other folks listed here. Yuba County is using this, Alameda County, but not a lot of folks have really gotten on board with this yet because it's so new. But I feel very comfortable and confident knowing that we've got this system. It was really well done and it's ready for fire season. Next slide. I want to touch briefly on some key evacuation terms. I've already mentioned them, but evacuation warning essentially means to you, get ready to go. You'll see on our Ready Nevada County dashboard or on Zone Haven, those will be colored yellow, shaded yellow. That means get ready. If you need extra time to evacuate, go ahead and leave. You don't need to wait. And then an evacuation order means you are under a direct order to leave. You must leave, get yourself and your family, and evacuate immediately. So those are the terms that we'll use in our code red messages that go out. Next slide. And I forgot to mention, the left side. If you ever feel threatened, you don't have to wait for an evacuation warning or order. There were people in Paradise who never got an evacuation order or warning, even though they were under one. So code red is not a silver bullet. You may get 0 notifications. If you feel unsafe, if you hear sirens, if you see smoke, leave. That's the most prudent thing to do. Take a vacation. Put your family and your go bag and your pets in the car and drive down to Roseville and go to a restaurant. Go to the mall. Next slide. Next slide. We'll go to Zone Haven real quick. I think if you want to click the link, Virginia, and we'll just show folks what that actually looks like. It'll take just a minute to pop up. But if you have the Know Your Zone magnet and you scan the QR code, this is where it will take you. Virginia will type an address up here. And it's really this easy. You type an address in and it'll snap the map to that location. You'll see a pin showing, okay, here's the information about that zone, and if we can X out of that, you'll see a pin showing where you are in that zone. So if there was a fire next to that zone, or that zone was under an order, you can say, okay, I'm right at the very edge of that zone. But if that one was under an order or warning, it would be shaded different colors. So if she was trying to remember what zone she was in, she would write that on her little card and move along. And then if we can switch over to the Ready Nevada County dashboard, I think you've got a link for that. The Ready Nevada County dashboard was a tool that we rolled out last year. Really effective way to communicate with the public if you have internet and you have access to a mobile phone or computer. This tool is something that you can use to plan when you're trying to plan an evacuation route, or if you just want to look at the area and know your zone because we have our zone map on there. It's also something that you can use during an event. So if there's a fire in your area and you want to see how close it is to you. Anytime we send a code red message to the public, we will show those messages on our dashboard. So if you think you got a code red, but you didn't pick up in time, or you didn't answer, you can always go to our dashboard, and there'll be a section where it'll have anything that went out on Twitter, anything that went out on code red, and you can see the message, you can play the message, you can read the message. And then the wildfire and evacuation incident dashboard is where it'll show our county. It's not showing it now because I think there's some connectivity problems with what they're doing here with the laptop. But it'll show our county, it'll show all the zones, and if there was a fire, you may even see the footprint of the fire, shelter locations, a lot of great information there, so you can access that before, during, and after an event. And there's a lot of different layers there, so you can again use it for roadside vegetation management, which is actually a new layer we've added, air quality, public safety power shutoff. There's a lot of great info there, weather. So I encourage you to go explore that, readynevadacounty.org/dashboard. Go to the next slide. Only a couple slides left, folks, getting to the end. So this last, one of the last tools I want to talk about is the evacuation tag. I've got one in my hand here. There's also one of our legacy evacuation tags from when this tool was rolled out last year, hanging on the mailbox in the picture. But what this is something that you should keep with your go bag. I actually have mine wire tied to the back of my main door, my front door of my house, so that if I have to evacuate, I'm going to grab this tag and I'm going to wire tie it to my mailbox or my reflective sign. What you want to do is put it in a really visible place that associates the tag with your address. So that as a deputy is driving down the street and they're evacuating folks, he actually is going to have a computer or an iPad, and he's going to make a check mark of either like E for evacuated, or he's going to, and if he doesn't see the tag, he's going to go down to your driveway, knock on the door, he or she, and make sure that you made it out okay. So that may take that deputy anywhere from 2 minutes to 5 minutes to 10 minutes that he's got to verify that you're not home. So what you're doing with this tag is you're making it clear to that person that you've made it out safely, and they don't need to spend any time on your house. So instead of he or she spending 5 minutes at your house, they're spending 5 seconds at your house. And then that time that you've now given to him, he can give to your neighbors. So it's really going to expedite evacuation in your community if you use this tag. These were used during the Jones fire, and the feedback from law enforcement was that they were great. It really made getting through the process of checking to see that people made it out really expeditious. One thing I want to mention with the evacuation tags, everybody thinks this is the come boot me sign, that if they hang this on their mailbox, the looters are going to just say, oh, that person's out, so let's go rob them. Two things. Law enforcement is going to saturate the area after evacuation to secure it against looters and things like that. Also to keep people from harm as much as they can, as it's safe for them to do. And also, when they check your house, if you don't have an evacuation tag there, they're going to put one there anyway, so that another deputy does not go and knock on your door. So you're going to get one anyway. It's probably best if you voluntarily participate in the program and hang one of these on your door or on your mailbox. And then the last slide is going to be a video that was put together about 2 years ago. Another great collaborative effort with all of our law chiefs from Nevada City, Grass Valley, and the sheriff. And this is going to talk about that Hilo Siren, and then I'll transition to my question slide. I'll be done.
Hi, I'm Sheriff Shannon Moon, and even though it just rained, it's important to remember we're still in the middle of fire season. Keeping this in mind, your local police chiefs and I would like to introduce you to a new sound we will be using to notify you and your family of an immediate evacuation order. This new high-low system will not replace our code red notifications. It is simply another way in which we can notify you and your family of an emergency in your area. Situational awareness means using all of your senses during an emergency.
Eyes, nose, and ears.
The Hilo Siren is a new sound to help you stay safe in an emergency.
It is specifically designed to alert you to an immediate evacuation order.
If you hear this sound, it means only one thing: evacuate immediately. You will only hear this sound during an evacuation order.
If time permits, officers and deputies will be responding to your area and using PAs and going door to door to do evacuations. But if you hear this sound, you can help them in doing their job safely and evacuate the area immediately.
If you missed the announcement or have questions, please do not call 911. Immediately institute your family's evacuation plan. Contact 211 if you have questions, or go to a trusted media source once you are safely evacuated.
Remember, 911 is only for emergencies.
The Nevada County Sheriff's Office, Grass Valley Police Department, and Nevada City Police Department have all installed these sirens in their patrol vehicles. So if you hear this siren, it means one thing and one thing only: evacuate and evacuate immediately.
Nevada County is now part of a special pilot program instituted by Napa County to be better prepared for evacuations. State, regional, and local officials who made this happen now welcome you, our community members, to the team.
Your job? Know the sound and know what it means.
Evacuate.
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 So I think our law chiefs have made it pretty clear that if you hear the Hilo Siren, it means one thing: evacuate. They did touch on 911, and I do want to talk about that briefly. We want to try to reserve 911 for things like reporting fires, injuries, medical emergencies. If you're stuck and you can't get out of your home, that is an emergency if you're under an evacuation order. So that's what 911 is for. We've tried to present a lot of other ways tonight that you can stay informed, whether it be somebody in your group of 5, the internet, code red, the radio, where you can get information. But if you hear the Hilo Siren, like I said, they're only using that siren because there's an evacuation order in your area and you need to leave. You don't need to verify that with 911. So tonight we've provided a lot of information and a lot of different tools to prepare you for this 2021 wildfire season. If you have any questions, please check out our website, readynevadacounty.org, or contact our office. And I'll turn it over now to Gene.
Thank you, Paul. That was very impressive. I'm not really amazed, but I'm impressed about how much knowledge you have on this issue. One thing I wanted to mention that, when we talk about evacuation, we usually think the scenario is going to be there's a fire that's 6 hours away, and we're going to get a notice, and we're going to get our stuff together. The code red's going to go out, and then we're going to leave, and it's all going to be very methodical. The truth is, the fire could happen next door to your house. Maybe code red isn't even up yet. It could be that you walk out the door and you see flames. There's power lines down, or there's a car into a power pole, or that emergency could be right there. And code red isn't going to go out yet because the sources, the law enforcement and fire aren't even on scene yet. So what we've asked Chief Wagner to do from Penn Valley Fire is to talk about the situations if you're caught in like a vehicle or a home or out in the wild blue yonder. The first key is to evacuate. I think you said that about 6 times there at the end, and that's the key. Is that if you're concerned or you get the code red message, evacuate. If for some reason you come across emergency situations that Chief Wagner's going to talk about, he's going to tell you how to stay as safe as you possibly can. Chief Wagner.
That was, thanks, Gene. Yes, evacuate. Get out early and let us do our jobs. And then when we are not tying up any resources from us having to come in and get you out. If you go back to the Lobo fire, when we did that evacuation, and we're told 6 hours to get people out of Lake Wildwood, when we were using the high-tech method of a paper map tape the side of the truck and our fingers going, it went this much distance in 2 hours. And we went, it's in Lake Wildwood in 2 hours, and it's going to take 6 hours to evacuate. Bye. Get them out of there, and get them out of our way. That's the reality of it sometimes. So getting all those messages out, Bob Jacobs that night of getting woke up in the middle of the night and driving down the road, and his first code red message coming out. If you remember, the town hall meetings a few years ago, he pulled over at the side of the dam, the white spot on the road, and sent the first code red message on his way to the office. And so you might not have the time. So plan ahead, be prepared, and think about those situations when we have these fire weather watches, and then they start transitioning into the red flag warnings. Take that as your preparation moment to be prepared. Get your car fueled up. Park it outside the garage, facing the waiting. So you don't have to try to turn around in the driveway. At dark 30, when you're under a stressful situation, that you can just drive straight out the driveway and right on down the road and keep on getting yourself on out of harm's way. And that shares, gives us that opportunity to get in and make that opportunity, and start making a difference with the fire. And be tuned into what's going on in your community, the situational awareness that they talk about. That's just what's happening, because we can't do everything, and we can't be everywhere. So, if you were caught in a situation, I'll start with the first one, was in your vehicle. The first thing is to stay calm, and think clearly. If you get into a panic situation, you're going to make bad decisions. Last year, I even had when I say backing in, just so you can head straight out. Her house was on fire. She was on the upper floor of her house, came down and realized that the fire was already through the outside of her house, through the kitchen, coming through the kitchen door, and it was rapidly going to cut off her pathway for her and her kids out of the upper floors of her house. She turned around, grabbed her kids, made it down the driveway, out the front door without her shoes on, got into her vehicle, and turning around in her driveway, she backed into a telephone pole and took out the entire record panel of her car, and was sitting at the bottom of the driveway when we got there. And so, stressful situation. Fire was, we quickly contained the fire, but she lost her cool. She wrecked her car. Made it out without even shoes or any clothes on her back or anything. Didn't even take her phone out to call 911. Unfortunately, a neighbor saw it and called 911. Smelled the smoke, started investigating the smoke, and the neighbors were the ones that called 911. She's sitting out at the end of the driveway going, I can't even call anybody. What do I do? She was in complete panic mode. So try to stay calm. Granted, it's going to be a stressful situation. If you're in your vehicle and you are caught with fire, turn your headlights on for increased visibility. And I saw the videos coming out of the campfire. It was the middle of the day and it was pitch dark. So that helps you see. It helps us see your vehicle. It helps other cars see you by having your headlights on. Park if you do get caught, park in an area that's as clear of vegetation as you can. I try to tell people after these things to think about, if you're driving down the road, where are there big open fields? Where are there white spots? Where is there a parking lot? Where is there some place that if I get cut off by fire, as I'm driving down Pleasant Valley Road, or I'm driving down 95 Road, where's the next spot that I can turn into is going to be a big open area that I could shelter into? Lay down, in the vehicle, cover yourself with a blanket, try to stay away from the windows. Keep the windows closed, turn off your ventilation system so you're not pulling outside air and smoke and things like that. And you're going to be able to stay in your car for a fair amount of time until it starts off-gassing. And at some point in time, you may have to exit your vehicle and find refuge outside of your vehicle somewhere else. Because nowadays, with all the modern cars, with all the plastics, the foams, everything else, the carpeting, everything that's inside of your car, as soon as that starts off-gassing inside the car, you start taking a lot of heat. It's going to put a lot of toxic chemicals into that smoke, and you may not die, you won't die from the fire, you'll actually die from the smoke inhalation from it. So at some point, if you're in that serious of a situation, you'll have to get out on fire. And again, then stay calm, go to an area that's open to vegetation, low-lying spots, depressions, tools that we use, hide behind something. You can get behind a building, get behind a house, let it, use it, like we call it, an eddy effect. Stand on the lee side of the house if the fire's coming this way, hide up on the back side of a building behind large rocks or some type of a large rock outcropping or things like that, or get down as low as you possibly can on the ground. Put your feet towards the oncoming fire, your head facing away from it, and try to dig a hole with your hands to get your face down below the ground, or even if you can dig a hole in the soil to get the cleanest air that you could possibly breathe, and get out. Things that we recommend you start doing is fill up bathtubs, fill up the sinks with water, locate your towels, get everybody together in your house. You can place wet towels at the bottom of the door openings and around that to try to seal those up from smoke and things, from entering the building in embers. Call 911 in any one of those situations and letting us know that where you are. If you have the ability to learn on your smartphone how to be able to look up your latitude and longitude if you don't know where you are, and at least be able to send out, to call 911 or to text it out of your location. And if you know how to read the GPS in your phone, to give out those directions that we can, to assist us in finding you if you don't know where you are. Same thing goes if you're cut off in your house. Putting those towels out, floodlights around, make sure all the windows and doors are closed. You can move, if you've got light, lacy curtains and draperies and things like that against the windows, remove those. If you've got big heavy blinds like these, close them. That'll help to shield the heat and deflect some of the heat away from the building. Close all your interior doors and move to the farthest point of the house away from where the fire's going to approach the house at. A house from the outside can burn for quite a while on the exterior of that home before it's going to get untenable for you inside that home, and then have your pathway out of the building. And oftentimes the flame fronts will hit the house, and the active flame front may pass by in 5 or 10 minutes, and it's past the house, to where that first 5 minutes is going to be untenable outside. Stay inside the structure. Once the fire's moved past your structure, then exit the structure and then get safely out of there. And that's a last resort survival tool that firefighters will use too, is to make entry into a structure, let the fire pass us, park the engine up next to the building on the lee side of it, away from where the fire's coming from, and wait for the fire to go past, and then we'll go out and put the structure out at that point, or continue on the fire piece of it. Other things that you can do, as we talk about the red flags, put your garden hoses out, put nozzles on them, be prepared. Somebody on the property or open area, you put buckets of water out there for embers to start falling. If you can put those embers out in your yard, you can fill buckets of water and stage them around your yard. If you don't have that, put a tool out there. Wearing a long sleeve shirt and pants, not being out there in shorts and flip-flops trying to run around if you've got a fire coming at you, to be able to put out small spot fires around your yard. Other things are clearing, your patio furniture off of your deck. Either get it off the deck away from it, just throw it away, as far away, or bring patio furniture inside the building, because patio cushions are really good spots for embers to land, and it burns really well and very hot and very smoky. Moving those things away, putting a ladder up for firefighters. If you have a ladder, set the ladder out there in the driveway. You might not be the one going up on the roof, but if we get there and there's a ladder sitting by the front and we need to get on the roof to clear the roof with the gunners or things like that, and you already have your ladder stage out there for us, that makes it that much faster for us to pick up your ladder, throw it up against the building and get on the roof. We may use your garden hoses rather than using our hoses, because it's quicker. If they're already sitting out and they're not hidden and they're either laying out for us, we can use those hoses for spot fires and things, and that keeps our vehicles ready to go, keeps the tank and the water in those tanks and those types of things as well. So there's other things that you can do to help us out. What's that? Don't lock your door. Yeah, if we need to get in, that's something that we'll do is we'll go in. If you do have to evacuate, it's not locking the door, so that way if we do need to get in and close windows or shut anything down, we can access the building, we can take care of those things. Make sure that the people are out of the house too. The evacuation tags are there. In addition to those evacuation tags, law enforcement's going to check those homes. Fire department's going to come through again, and we're going to do another triage in the home to make sure that people are actually out of the home. We look for safety zones. Is there a safety zone for the crew? Is the house have defensible space? Is there something that we can do by running around, closing some windows, shutting some doors, removing some furniture from the house, or a few last things that we can do as a prep to increase the chances that the home will survive that fire front? That's where hoses and ladders and things like that will play. play into it. And again, as a last resort, is if we get cut off, we don't need to be sitting there trying to break a door down to get into the house to save our hides, then we can open the door and get back into a building. For our own safety and shelter. Our absolute last resort survival is the little aluminum foil shelters that turn us into a big potato, but that's our absolute last resort for a firefighter is if you have to deploy shelters out into those areas. So we'll use the structure and wait on it. Anything else? Like I said, the biggest thing is plan and prepare ahead of time. It's easy for me to stand up here and say, things like this, but, I've spent my entire career dealing with emergent situations and stressful situations, and for us to remain calm. But it's kind of ingrained in us after many years of doing this. And so for the general homeowner that never sees a stressful situation, when you see one of these things, you're gonna, that fight or flight is gonna kick in. You make bad decisions. So if you've practiced and you've prepared and you've got your bags ready to go and your car's back in, even if we've talked after Lobo Fire with all the things that Virginia did with the buddy system of putting people together and doing mock evacuations, getting in your car with your neighbors and your buddies, going up and having a cup of coffee somewhere, and how to discussing how each person evacuated the area or got out, different roads that they took, different spots that they could take it as a safety zone or a shelter spot, a temporary refuge area that they can duck into and let the fire front pass. It may make the difference between you becoming a statistic on the board or surviving one of these type of events. I like to say that we'll be there, 100% of the time, but firefighters are kind of a limited commodity. And when we get some of these fires, and what we've seen with the fire and storms that have been occurring the last couple of years, the way they're growing and they're spreading, firefighters are stretched pretty thin around the state, and we may not be able to have as many people in there at that time as we would want. So if the public is able to help us dealing with their defensible space, getting the ignition zones around their homes cleaning off the roofs and their gutters, and being prepared, and then as these things help, is going to help us. You're going to help yourselves. You're going to help us, and that's going to help us get our job done more efficiently. Questions? No questions.
Thank you, Chief. All right, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about, specifically for Lake Wildwood, the responsibilities for Lake Wildwood and then for each member. Next. I'm going to try to do it in an organized method like the county does with ready, set, go. The ready part, we really should, as members in Lake Wildwood, be pretty much done with the ready part. Correct me if I'm wrong. We shouldn't be out mowing and cutting weeds and those kinds of, that should have been done already. We shouldn't have too much of the ready part to do. But what has happened, which is fantastic, is the fuel reduction crew, and it's one of the great things that Lake Wildwood has done in the last 2 years. You guys have seen them out working. The 10-10-15 rule, or 10 feet off the roadway, 15 feet up, being cleared. The two gentlemen we have working those crews are doing a fantastic job of clearing off the roadways. The whole county is working on the different escape routes. The theory is that if you are stuck in traffic, and you will be stuck in traffic, that there's not going to be the biggest heat source right next to you. That's why we went 10-foot clearance and 15 feet up, for the most part. That's happening. Our Firewise community, Barbara Tiggs is the chairperson of that, they're doing a fantastic job of defensible space advisory visits. They're not inspections, they don't give citations. They come out and look at your home and look at ways for you to make your home or fire safe. If you want to sign up for that inspection, or not inspection, the advisory visit, go to the Lake Wildwood website, and then there's a Firewise Committee button, click on that, and then you can sign up for an advisory visit. I think right now you're probably 30 or 40 ready to go that need to be inspected, but they've done a fantastic job. Education, Lake Wildwood and the committees, we need to educate our people. Things like the town hall meeting, where we have people come, the experts come and talk to us about it. And Barbara's committee and the Fire Rights Committee and Public Safety Committee have done an outstanding job of providing information. It's all there. You just have to read it and understand it and use it. Let's talk about the set part of Ready, Set, Go. We have these town hall meetings. We want members to be educated, have a plan, to go back. All the things that were talked about tonight, you need to take to heart. Because there's a very good chance that this year we're going to be evacuated at some point in time. We're going to have a danger. One thing that's fantastic that has sprung up in the last couple of years, again, the Firewise Committee did this, is the neighborhood groups. The county has a program called Find Your Five, which is very successful, and it's a great idea. But Lake Wildwood has had these neighborhood groups, and it's anywhere from 2 people to 20 people to 30 people. And all it really is get to know your neighbors, so that if they go on vacation, you know they're on vacation. You have a key to their house. If you're taking care of them, they're gone for the day. Maybe they're gone. And they have pets, and we get to where to evacuate. You're going to go to their house, you're going to help with their pets. So just know your neighbors, know your friends. That is a fantastic program and growing all the time, and you really appreciate that. Learn all potential evacuation exits are out. There are people in Lake Wildwood that have never gone out the north gate, ever, or never gone out the main gate. They've always gone from their house, Lake Wildwood Drive, main gate, Highway 20, Grass Valley, then you know where Smartsville is. So what we want you to do is drive the different routes. 2/3 of our vehicles go in and out of the main gate every day. Only 1/3 go out the north gate. So we're trying to encourage people to use the north gate. I think during a local fire, there were people that lived on Lake Forest over this area of Lake Wildwood, saw all the traffic going out the main gate, drove traffic free to the north gate, and drove right out. So we're trying to encourage people to know different routes out. One thing that Lake Wildwood has done, which I think is another huge step, is they've involved security and public works as a group to come in and help direct traffic. The sheriff department is in charge of evacuation, and our resources are at their disposal. We follow their direction. But as far as moving people inside Lake Wildwood, we have crews, we have signs, we have communication that will direct people to go to a certain gate. Maybe it's a gate, maybe it's another exit, not the main gate, not the north gate, but another exit. So that's one thing we have going for us, but that's the direction of the sheriff department. We don't do that on our own. We want everyone to stay alert and aware. It's interesting how many people don't have a clue. I had some gentlemen walk up to me about a year ago and said, "What's this about evacuations?" And I don't know what to say. The information was there. He just didn't want to read it. Anticipate evacuations if conditions warrant. Evacuate early, evacuate often. One thing that's scary is if you decide, let's say you're in Grass Valley, you're at a movie, and your phone goes off and you have an alert to evacuate. You may or may not be allowed to come back in Lake Wildwood, depending on what the situation is. If you got pets at home, your to-go bag, your medication, you may not come in. So if you have a red flag day or the weather's bad, put the to-go bag in your car. Tell your neighbor, we're going to a movie. If we have to evacuate, can you come and get my pets? Make those arrangements. Be situational aware of what's going on. There's an 80%, 20% kind of rule. I think that between County OES, the Sheriff Department, CAL FIRE, Midfield Fire, Lake Wildwood, Firewise Committee, Public Safety Committee, all the information is there. And 20% of the people may read it, 80% will not. When you get called to evacuate, it's going to be dark, it's going to be windy, it's going to be scary, And so the 80% are the ones that are going to cause a problem. I was interested to hear Lieutenant Jacobs told me only 30% of the people in Nevada County have signed up for Code Red. 66%? 30% households. But still, why isn't everybody signed up for Code Red? It's such an easy thing to do. So we know that the professionals, they train, they think about this every day, all day. You can see when they're delivering their messages how well versed they are. We have an obligation as members to be aware and to be part of the solution, not the problem. I want to thank the speakers, and do I have any questions that have come in? 2. All right, we have at least my mom's watching, so. Let me see what, and who's it for?
For Paul.
Will evacuation message only be sent to the zone being evacuated or to a larger area? And you have to pick our zone out of a list. So, if there's evacuation, does it go just to that zone or does it go to the areas?
Great question. I think everybody can hear me okay. Yeah, so the Sheriff's Office is going to, again, like we talked about, work with the fire folks to determine who is threatened. And so they will make a determination. They have the same maps that you do when you look at the Reagan Nevada County dashboard with all the zones. And they are going to say, these 5 zones need to get a warning and these 5 zones need to get an order. And so that's how they will determine who gets those notifications. So you should only get a notification if you're under one of those designations, evacuation warning or evacuation order. They can select multiple zones as they send the warning, and then they'll send another round of messages with the order. They'll likely send the order first because that's more pressing. But they can message all of those zones at once under the order. Does that answer the question?
I think it does, yes. And then, the order to evacuate is not just given in haste, because there are things that they have to prepare for. If they tell people to leave, if they have to arrange for shelters and housing and food and other things like that, they just can't tell people go. So there's some things that have to come together before they. It isn't made lightly. It's not just boom, let's get people out of here just for the fun of it. So second question. Why did the 3 fires close together in early June not appear on the dashboard? Evacuations were called on at least one of them. Do you know what they're talking about?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So I think there were some fires that were in Yuba County that, were on YubaNet. People saw the smoke. They saw it probably on the cameras. It was talked about. But if those fires were not threatening Nevada County zones, and again, that's going to be up to, we talked about the decision matrix that's in place between law and fire. If those folks did not determine that those residents in Nevada County were threatened, then they were not going to issue an evacuation warning or order. There was one fire, the Hilo Fire, I believe, where there were some local evacuation orders given. And so I think that was like a couple of streets maybe, not an entire zone, and I'll let Chief Wagner talk about that as well. But I think we issued a evacuation warning knowing that there were street level evacuation orders that were given. So it didn't make sense to order the entire zone to go. It was only a warning, and I think again there were street level evacuation orders given by law enforcement, but I'll let Chief Wagner pick up the difference there.
Use those. Yeah, that was, as Gene said, we don't take that decision lightly to do evacuations and warnings when we start pushing people out of their homes. So oftentimes we've got to make that decision once we get on scene what the fire's doing, where is it going, and if we believe that we got the ability to be able to quickly contain this fire and hold it. It's that point, for that first few minutes. If we started issuing zone haven evacuation notices or things every time we were dispatched to a fire, this would be multiple times a day. Oftentimes we're getting dispatched out to it's a smoke check and we find that it's a barbecue. It's somebody with a didn't understand that we're in a burn ban, that they're not supposed to be burning or they were out there doing the right thing at the wrong time, started a small fire, maybe they've got it contained or closely to contain it. These go on every single day where we're getting dispatched out for fires, and we get there and realize, oh, it's a very small spot. It's the size of the rug. It's a 5x5, 1 inch. You can handle it. If every time we got one of these dispatches, you literally would go nuts with your phone being alerted every single time, day and night when these are occurring. So it's the incident commander that when we get there, we make that rapidly make that determination. And sometimes we can make that decision from a distance away of what the smoke column is doing. As we're driving down the road, the color of the smoke, the winds, the temperature, the humidity, time of day, location of where that fire was. There's about 9,000 things flying through our mind as an incident commander as you're trying to navigate your way code 3, listening to multiple different frequencies on the radio, and making a plan in your head of attack, plus taking into account what the weather's doing, all of these other things that are going on. And oftentimes, we can make those decisions ahead of time that we're not going to have to be doing that. Or you get out there and you go, okay, this thing is rapid. We've got a rapid rate of spread on the fire, and we're going to start looking at evacuations, and that's when we pull that pin on making that. Landon sitting across here nodding. I was sitting at home in my recliner the other night listening to him on one of the Yuba County fires the other night going, if we don't catch it, it's going to be in the homes, and the reflex time for us to get units dispatched and get engines down there in and around these homes to start looking at this. It's like you roll the dice. It's like, forget it. We're going to start the evacuations. We'll make some notifications. We'll get the engines in there, and they caught the fire, and most of that stuff then was able to get rolled back pretty quickly. But that's what's going through our head as a chief officers and the commanding officers going into these calls.
And I would also just add that, let's trust our first responders, let's trust the system, let's trust the decisions that they're making. Like we said, every situation is different. In that situation, we did end up issuing an evacuation warning. We did toggle on zone haven, especially when it's a developing situation. Those things don't always happen immediately. So let's give our first responders a little bit of space to work through the system and take care of those immediate actions. You will be notified. We are going to get those things going, but it does take time. So that's why we say if you're hearing something on the scanner, you read something on Ubinet, you see smoke, you smell smoke, you're uncomfortable, leave. That's the best thing you can do. Leave early.
I think those are good answers. I know with the local fire, the weather changes over the course of the fire. I mean, it can change just in a few minutes. I think that the local fire, the fire was headed for Lake Wildwood because of the wind. The wind stopped in reverse directions. Had it not stopped in reverse directions, we would have had fire in Lake Wildwood, probably within a couple hours. So, but another one of the messages that just came over was somebody heard planes and wonders why they weren't alerted. Well, I think we hear planes 2-3 times a day.
So I'll speak to that a little bit. So to be honest, as far as evacuations go, you don't want to hear an evacuation order every time there's an incident. And Chief Wagner spoke to that a little bit. Like he said, we have incidents every day that folks in the county are unaware of, and that's okay because it's not going to affect you. I can speak specifically to the 3 incidents to the west of us, and 2 in Yuba County, 1 in Nevada County. The Intenco fire kind of split Beale Air Force Base land and Yuba County, Spencerville Wildlife area. There were evacuation notifications in Yuba County. They utilized zone haven and they activated some of that stuff on their part. I was in communications with Nevada County Sheriff's Department, updating them as to exactly where that fire was and where I thought it was going to go and where I thought we were going to stop it. And I came around and turned, and there they were. So they were there. Sheriff's deputies out of the county had representatives down there ready to initiate evacuations in the Nevada County side. Had it gotten to that, but we were lucky enough that it didn't. And then with the other fire, it ended up being about 300 acres of Beale incident. Also in Yuba County, when I got to that one, Conversations with our air attack and some of my ground resources put it at about a 20-minute impact to Walsh Road area, if you're familiar with that, off of Chuck Yeager. And with that, I made a resource order for engines to come in and do structure defense. Yuba County initiated some orders and warnings in Zone Haven, but it didn't affect Nevada County, and we ended up, actually our bulldozers got across it and stopped the fire probably 3/4 to half a mile out in front of the structures and kept it out, so we didn't actually need to do any defensive tactics on structures. And again, if you're up here in like Wildwood, Upper Nevada County, even Smartsville, you know, they look close. And we had multiple people calling on the mobile to their control burn. There was a lot of phone calls on that. And it was actually control burn. A lot of people thought it was just down at the bottom of Big Oak Valley. But it was several miles to the west. But we don't take the evacuation orders lightly. The last thing that we want to do is displace people from their homes. At the same time, it will be the first thing that I do if it's going to be necessary to save people's lives and get them out of the way of danger. So.
All right, a couple more issues. I wanted to comment too, on June 8th or 9th, we had a tabletop drill here. And I appreciate Paul did a fantastic job of setting it up with him. Jacobs, Len was there, Clayton was there from Penn Valley Fire. Tabletop, it was a situation where I think we started with the local fire circumstances, and then how would we react, and how would we communicate with OES and with the sheriff and with the fire department. And we learned a lot. It was very valuable, I think, for Lake Wildwood people and for our personnel. One of the questions that just came over is what happens if there's a tree that falls across my driveway and I'm trying to get out? Well, one of the situations that the wizard over here gave us, that tabletop drill, was an auto accident between a truck, a car, and a golf cart at Chaparral Circle, Chaparral Drive, and Lake Forest. Now that's one of the biggest choke points that we have on Lake Wildwood, and he blocked it off. So if you look on Chaparral Circle, there's only really one way out of that area, other than opening up some other gates. That would take some resources to do. So this person who asked about if the tree fell across the roadway, Lake Wildwood does have some resources that can come over there and push that tree out of the way. What we did here is our public works got their backhoe or their skip loader, drove down to the intersection of Chaparral Circle, Chaparral Drive, Lake Forest, and pushed the vehicles off the road and opened them back up. If we had to wait for a tow truck or something else, that would have taken quite a bit of time. So I think the fact that we're offering up resources from Lake Wildwood to help with Lake Wildwood traffic issues is a big thing, a different from what we had before. So I think that answers the question, hopefully, that came over about if my driveway is blocked. That's a 911 call. Just like we were talking earlier, I had a person ask me a question today that they have a neighbor who has some medical issues, and they have always been taking care of this person, but they're moving out of the area. And if they have to evacuate, is there a list that they can go on? And then people would come and help them. Well, years ago, county health tried to do that. But to keep that list current is impossible because people move away, people move into a convalescent hospital, they do whatever, and they don't keep that list updated. Plus, Lake Wildwood does not have the resources to commit to say, yes, we will come out and help you out. So, the goal is to use neighbors, neighborhood groups, family and friends. And if you are truly stuck in your home, that is a 911 call. That's a true 911 call. And as resources are available, the fire or alarm will respond and help. Any more questions? Yes?
One comment, Gene. Gene, that might be a good question for Chief Wagner, and that is the Lake Wildwood Golf Course a good evacuation spot?
If I'm in the fairway, it's not. You're in danger, because, yeah.
I think if we're in the same county, we're in danger. You know, that's a personal decision that you're going to have to make. You're not likely going to find us coming out and saying, yes, this is what you do. It's going to be a personal decision for those folks. You know, and if that's where you feel that's comfortable, okay. You know, the green grass doesn't burn as well. It will burn. There is dead material in there, and it will burn. It's going to be hot. It's going to be smoky. It may be windy. You're going to have embers coming down around you. If you try to go out and lay down, you're going to get holes burned in your clothes. Those types of things. But you know, from a decision-making standpoint, if that's your best option, that's your best option.
I would say don't wait to evacuate and have that as part of your plan. Don't hang around and then say, well, I'll just go to the golf course. That's not a good plan.
Yeah, you can't get a good tea time anyway at that time of the day.
I would agree with that as well. Make sure that when you get an evacuation order, that you get moving. Don't wait. One of the biggest issues that we had over in Paradise was the amount of resources we had to commit to people who did not evacuate. And granted, that was a very rapidly developing incident, but there was plenty of people who had notification that they didn't take it seriously, which is another reason we don't put that out there if we don't absolutely have to, because it's that cry wolf theory, right? If we fire off an evacuation order, if they blast a code red out for every single fire that we have, it'll start becoming white noise and people won't pay attention to it.
I think the message I'm hearing is evacuate, evacuate, evacuate. If for some reason you can't, you're stuck. The golf course is not a bad place. The middle of the lake is okay, but we all like to breathe. And it's going to be smoky, it's going to be dark, there's going to be embers. So if you don't have the mask for the particles in the air and the smoke, you can have that issue also. If you have asthma, emphysema, any other respiratory issue, and you're in that smoke, it's really not very healthy at all. So I think the message I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is evacuate, evacuate, evacuate. Don't think I'm going to drive over to the community center or the senior room here and I'm going to just hang out here for a couple hours and go back home. Don't make that your plan, because that's not a good plan. Any other questions or comments from our virtual viewers?
Yeah, there's one here, just to tag back on the tree issue. Who would you call exactly if the tree was down? Do you call 911? You call the fire department?
We actually wrote this into the exercise. We did have a tree go down in our simulated event the other day. In this event, Public Works took care of it, the Lake Wildwood Public Works. Something to keep in mind, though, is that the Lake Wildwood Public Works folks, staff, they're not first responders, so if there's an evacuation order, they have to leave too. So then it depends on the situation. So if they're under a warning, we would hope that Public Works staff is not, and I should probably let you speak to this, but in the exercise, this is how it played out, they were available to address that, because they were under a warning.
Yeah, but I do think that it could easily be a 911 call. If somebody feels that threatened and they can't get out, I think it's a 9, and then they would sort it out. They would look for resources, county, Lake Wildwood, or some resources to help with that. What was the issue about the dashboard? I think you, Charles, you had something about, is it just evacuation stuff on the dashboard? I thought you had a pretty good slide that showed a lot of stuff on that dashboard.
So the dashboard is only for evacuation situations, not just fires. Is that true?
If other emergency situations would come up, a hazardous material spill, those things.
Yeah, we would put things on there. It could be a shelter in place, because there's a law enforcement action in the area, and so we're sending code reds out to say shelter in place, and there's a color code for that. So it'll be, I think it's purple. So the dashboard is a dynamic tool that we're going to use for all hazards that we have under our span of control in Nevada County. It's also a pre-planning tool, so you can use it when there's not an emergency. You can use it after the fact when everything's a different color saying keep out because it's not safe to go back. And we'll turn it green when it is safe to go back. So if you're waiting to know, can I go back to my house? You'll see it'll turn green and then you'll know to go back. So there's a lot of functions there. I encourage the public to go look at it.
We were going to ask Lieutenant Jacobs too about repopulation issues, because I know, people think, well, the fire's out, why can't I go back home? Well, if the power is still off here and the sewer pumps aren't working or there's no power, they may not let you back in yet until some of those things are resolved. Sewer is important. I mean, if you can't flush a toilet and you're there for 3 days, that could be a problem. So repopulation can be, people will say, well, why can't I go back? Fire's out, let me go back. Well, it's only when it's safe to go back.
We held down a little bit. So there's a lot of different criteria for repopulation. Even though the fire front is passed, maybe we're at a point where most of our mop-up operations, and we're more in a patrol status, but we have criteria for making safe, what we call making safe. And for the fire department operations, that's making sure that stuff in and around houses is mopped up to a point where somebody's not going to come in and step in a hot stump hole, and then we have to fly them to a burn center. There's other stuff that we deal with utility companies, not just power. How many propane tanks are in like Wildwood?
Everybody has a propane tank.
So like 10,000?
Yeah,
2,200,
2,500.
So when the fire comes through, a lot of those utilities and a lot of that infrastructure is damaged, and we have process for securing propane tanks with the propane companies. We talked about the sewer, utility lines across the roads, and it's not necessarily just power being turned back on, but PG&E has to have the ability to come in and get that infrastructure that's collapsed up off the ground out of people's way, so you're not getting tangled up in wires. So there's a lot more to it, and it usually takes some time. Anywhere from, it's hard to put anything definitive on it. It really depends on the scenario and resource availability. But sometimes it can be up to a week. I've seen some areas it's up to 2 weeks, just depending on what was impacted. There's hazardous material releases from chlorine tanks and pools and storage units and all kinds of stuff that has to get sorted out.
Okay, I have one last question from me, and then we'll wrap this up. I've been told we have to wrap it up because we're out of batteries. No, is that it? Is that for real? Oh, wow. That was a joke, but anyway. After the 49er fire, when it took so long to evacuate Lake Wild in the area, there was a center lane put in from the main gate to Highway 20. And the purpose was to help with evacuations. Somebody asked a question, it was a good question. If there aren't law enforcement or traffic control people in place, may we still use that center lane?
I can't answer that question. I think there's going to be a lot of things happening during a wildfire evacuation. You may not see law and fire folks. I would say do what's safe, because if you're doing something against traffic rules, you might create an accident, which could make things worse. So I would say use your best judgment and be as safe as possible as you're egressing. I'm sure the chiefs would agree with that.
Okay, my fast answer was use it when you get to Highway 20. You need to go left if you're in the center lane, and right if you're in the right-hand lane. Because if we wait for the intersection and start having the center lane go to Smartsville, and the right-hand lane go to Grass Valley, that's going to be an issue unless there's traffic control there. Okay, I want to thank everybody for coming. I appreciate a lot of information out here. Thanks, people, for watching. And those that are watching and recording later on, if you have any questions, you can please contact Public Safety Committee or Lake Wild Administration, and we will try to get an answer.